In 1970, an American Western comedy film written by James Lee Barrett made it to the big screen. And that movie was called The Cheyenne Social Club. It was directed and produced by Gene Kelly, and it starred James Stewart, Henry Fonda, and Shirley Jones. The story is about an aging cowboy that inherits a brothel and decides to turn it into a respectable boarding house, against the wishes of both the townspeople and the ladies that work there. Now, this movie sounds like a bad idea, no matter how you look at it, on multiple levels. For starters, the stars of the movie are two elderly actors that are towards the end of their careers, and these guys are in a comedy about prostitution. Then to top it off, you've got Gene Kelly, who is one of the last people that you would ever expect to direct this Western. Yeah, that's Gene Kelly, the song and dance guy. If you go ahead and push by all of the original feelings that you have for this movie, you might be pleasantly surprised and find that it's pretty funny and surprisingly endearing. The whole idea of Jimmy Stewart actually being the owner of a brothel and becoming a sugar daddy just sounds totally wrong, but somehow it manages to work. There's no singing and dancing in this Gene Kelly movie, but instead you've got Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda playing the characters of John O'Hanlon and Harley Sullivan. These guys are two grizzly old cowboys. They're busy roping steers in Texas when John gets a letter from Cheyenne, Wyoming, revealing that his long-lost brother DJ has left him a business as an inheritance. John goes to Wyoming to claim his inheritance, and Harley goes with him. These guys are inseparable, and they have been all their lives. John arrives in Cheyenne and is horrified to discover that his inheritance, the Cheyenne Social Club, is a brothel. The girls in the brothel are led by the warm-hearted Jenny, played by Shirley Jones, and her girls were all devoted to DJ, and they become just as devoted to John, at least until they found out that he was planning to close the club. Things get a bit more serious when John shoots hoodlum Corey Bannister for roughing up Jenny, and then Bannister's murderous family comes looking for revenge. The Cheyenne Social Club paints an idealized version of a whorehouse of which the women are really proud of their profession, and they completely worship their boss. Henry Fonda is by far the funniest thing in the film. He's a child in an adult's body, living out a completely carefree existence, with Stewart being the straight man and the grown-up of the two. As soon as the film begins, Fonda babbles through the entire opening credits, which according to the movie last for literally over thousands of miles. But I think this is basically to distract you from the pretty boring text that are appearing before your eyes. The relationship between these two cowboys is just endearing. It's pretty amusing as Fonda just follows Stewart wherever he goes, as he has nothing else to do with his time, but he really just enjoys his company. Now, it's pretty easy to tell that these two actors were lifelong friends just because of their chemistry in this movie. And what's even more interesting than that is the fact that these guys were such strong friends in real life, but they differed so much politically. Stewart was a Republican and Fonda was a Democrat. One of the film's major highlights is when the two are discussing politics, and this really mirrors the real-life personas of the two, and it brings to mind an occasion when their friendship was almost brought to an end when they got engaged in a fistfight over politics in 1947. This movie is the third of 3 films that Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda did together, the first 2 of which are some of the weakest films that you'll see these actors do. Thankfully, this third film was the charm. It took 35 years to get these legendary actors in a great film together, but I think this one was really worth the wait. Now, the Cheyenne Social Club is without a doubt a high-class brothel right next to a railroad. John falls into disfavor with both the club ladies and the men in Cheyenne when he decides that he's going to close the club. He just thinks it's the right thing to do. But then John learns that his brother's will had a provision in it that the property would revert to the railroad if the ladies moved. After Jenny gets assaulted by Bannister and then John kills Bannister, he regains some of his popularity. But the problem is the relatives of Bannister have come to Cheyenne for revenge. But John, Harley, and Jenny are able to successfully fight them off. He eventually becomes advised that there's actually more Bannister relatives that are coming to town soon to seek more revenge. So John transfers the ownership of the property to the Chief Madam Jenny, and he and Harley return to Texas. Now, this production is set in a brothel with suggestive dialogue, and this is really one of the few off-color films that you'll see Jimmy Stewart do. This film has the dubious distinction of having the only nude scene in it from a movie that Jimmy Stewart played in, and that was done by Elaine Devery. Jimmy Stewart agreed to do the film, and he suggested to the producers that they offer the part of Harley to his really good friend, Henry Fonda. Fonda read the script and agreed to do it, but he did have one suggestion. In the opening sequence, when the two ride to Cheyenne, his character had no dialogue at all in the original script. Fonda innocently asked for them to give his character something to say. The writer, James Lee Barrett, came up with the speech that Fonda gives. For years after the film was released, the sign that hung in the club listing the names of the girls hung in Barrett's home as a memento to the film. The exterior shots of the movie were shot at two Western film lots near Santa Fe, New Mexico. The Eves Movie Ranch, which was built specifically for this film, and the Bonanza Creek Ranch were the locations they shot at. The interiors were shot at Samuel Golden Studios in Hollywood. Like so many of these movies are, once the screenplay is done, they'll produce novels to go along with it, and this movie was no different. There was one by Philip Rock that followed the movie. One of the running gags in the film is that Harley had this irritating habit of cracking pecan shells in his hand. It actually winds up saving John's life when Harley accidentally distracts Corey Bannister during the showdown. Another gag they have is the snake oil salesman. His name is Dr. Foy, and he's selling the elixir Dr. Foy's Blue Nectar, which is supposed to cure anything that ails you. The local sheriff is real helpful, passing along information about the Bannisters and their violent habits, and it just so happens that he is constantly out of town answering court summons here and there, conveniently avoiding the shooting that's bound to happen. Corey Bannister, the only person in Cheyenne who doesn't treat John like a hero. He sits backwards in a chair at John's table and tells him in an overtly menacing manner that he doesn't like John because the Cheyenne Social Club once denied him service due to his poor hygiene. Now, the Cheyenne Social Club turned a small profit, but it was poorly received by the critics. It didn't really receive any notoriety until decades later, when numerous cable television channels broadcast the movie. Take a look at this movie. I think you might really enjoy it. It really is a sleeper, and it's got two of the best actors in the business and some pretty ladies to look at in the background. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.